All right, hi guys, welcome back. Today is a good Saturday. We're going to be talking about peaking. We're going to talk about a specific peak that I need to see players do a little bit more often, especially those in lower elos because of the way that they tend to interact with their environment and the way that they tend to peak. We're going to be talking about one particular thing that you can incorporate into your movement that will improve your peaking by a lot. And it has to do with understanding how peaking works in the first place. So before we do that, of course, we have to understand the problem, where the problem stems from in lower elos, and normally what the problem tends to kind of offer, and why you think you might be doing this. You might be thinking you're doing the right thing, but you are definitely making some mistakes. Okay, so we're going to be doing that, understanding the movement aspect of things, and then just showing you the peak. And then after this, I'm going to jump into the game, showing everybody how it's supposed to be done and some of the problems that might occur for you to visualize. Okay, so right from the beginning, right from the get-go, I'm going to shout out the fact that I'm taking in more students. If you're someone that's interested in one-on-one coaching, you can go into the Discord and kind of click around. You'll be able to find the one-on-one program that we're offering. Yep. Every single time that I've had a student within 3 weeks, they tend to improve really, really quickly. So I would kind of suggest kind of giving that a shot if you are looking into coaching or you haven't tried coaching before. I am very accepting of a lot of students that have different backgrounds in a lot of different things. All right, let's just jump right into the video. So, as I mentioned, we are going to be talking about the problem. So the first thing that I noticed that players tend to have an issue with is how they tend to approach an angle. When you are basically trying to aim, you are taught to pre-aim corners, taught to sort of put your crosser into the wall and use that to your advantage whenever you're trying to find opponents. However, I see that some people take that to heart, and their anticipation of the angle is actually what screws them over. So one of the main things that I see a lot of players that want to be good, and they see all of these videos that kind of talk about making sure that you're pre-aiming or that you're slicing the pie, right? They all tend to have the same issue. Now, using this little video right here, I'm going to show both the right way and the wrong way. But right here, just imagine you're playing here and you're trying to jiggle this corner. What I see a lot of players, what they tend to do is they either tend to hug too close to the wall or they tend to walk into the wall, and they essentially are showing their shoulder to the opponent. Okay. And what ends up happening when they are walking too close to the wall is that when they peek, because they're trying to be so methodical about it, they end up looking very slow. They look slow, they're exposing their shoulders, which basically gives the opponent plenty of time to react. And a lot of the times, they also get wall banged because they're so close to the wall. Okay, so when we're paying attention to something like this, right, you're going to see the opposite. This is just gameplay that I kind of just pulled up. You can see that when you're trying to look for an angle that you're trying to fight, it is better to kind of keep some distance away from the wall. That should be kind of like noted based on what I'm talking about. But the thing that you're going to notice is that each peak is directly on the angle that I want to fight, but I'm not slowly walking. I'm not using my shift key to walk into the angle. I am instead using my movement keys without any shifting to fight this area. This is how I'm able to catch opponents off guard and how I'm able to use it to my advantage. Notice how in the same angle right here, right? You're going to notice that I'll look into the wall and I'll actually move using my movement keys instead of using my shift key or approaching the angle too slowly. Now, this might be hard to kind of visualize. I will show it in Valorant once I jump into the range or the custom, but that is the problem. Players tend to believe that just pre-aiming the angle is enough, but their movement tends to complement how they peak. Now let's look a little bit into how the movement tends to work. So speed is what gives movement its meaning when you're fighting. And when you're fighting opponents, it is best for you to look at an opponent straight ahead. And in order for you to have the most advantages when you're moving and you're peeking an opponent, you always have to be directly in front of them. The perception of movement in the game is directly affected to which angle you're looking at an opponent. So let's say, for example, I am looking at this opponent right here, and I want you to picture an opponent as this little eye right here. If you guys are both in this eye right here, you guys are both going to be moving at your fastest if you're moving either left or right. Okay? Understanding that you'll always move the fastest on someone's screen when you are directly in front of them is key when you're trying to get better at fighting opponents and peeking them. So looking at this example back here, you're going to notice that right here as I peek, I'm actually directly in front of this guy, which is why it looks so fast probably in their screen, and it looks like I just probably pre-fired them or maybe even cheating, right? Maybe they have poor reaction time, but at the end of the day, I look fast enough on their screen, even though it doesn't look like it, to be able to take the advantage of that fight. And this is where that speed comes in. The perception of speed will only apply if you are in front of them, okay? When you're in front of them, that's where speed will be at its fastest. However, there are some things that you need to understand. When you are looking at an opponent, if they're not directly in front of you and you're moving, let's say, for example, diagonally, you will start to look slower. Perspective-wise, it doesn't matter if you are farther away or closer, right? If you are moving diagonally, you will always move slower on their screen regardless of the scenario, because diagonally is implementing two movement keys to them, and it looks like you are moving, oopsie, it looks like you're moving way slower trying to get to this point as opposed to trying to reach this point over here. You're essentially adding extra distance to their perception, making it seem as though you are a lot slower. Okay? And this is when we start incorporating other things like understanding movement. You're going to notice that these movement keys right here show a little bit of yellow. This is for a reason. If you are not well versed in the movement of Valorant, or maybe you're someone that is not well aware of the movement in Valorant, you need to make sure that you know that there's a slight ramp up to your movement. If you're keen on being able to notice these things, that you might have seen how there's a slight ramp up. Your speed doesn't immediately go to 100% the second that you use a movement key. So essentially, if, let's say, for example, you want to fight an opponent that's right in front of you, it's going to take a little bit of distance. And of course, these aren't proportional. These are arbitrary. This just shows that there is a little bit of ramp up before you go full speed. If you're fighting someone in front of you, it's going to take a little bit of time for you to be able to fully appear at your fastest in front of an opponent. If you add and incorporate things like diagonals and you use W and D or W and A, you're going to look slower. Incorporating all of these things in mind is what's going to make you slower. Other things that I have seen, remember how I mentioned that people get tagged through the wall or even potentially get shot and wall banged? This is where tagging comes in. Not only are people playing and they're using these diagonals and they're not trying to peek directly in front of their opponent, but they're also getting tagged and they're playing diagonally, or they're just using this little bit of a ramp up to think that they're peeking at their fastest. So how do you solve this problem? So this is where you kind of incorporate this movement idea of the slow peak, right? The whole idea of this ramp up, and add everything else that you've seen in the past, like between, pre-aiming the wall and making sure that you're slicing the pie and using this movement idea. So the way that it works is simply like this. Let's say, for example, that I am right here in this position and there's someone behind a wall. And basically I want to fight this opponent. Before you peek an area, the best way for you to be able to fight an opponent is not only to look at the area that you're trying to fight, but also prepare yourself movement-wise. And the way that I've seen that a lot of players tend to succeed in this is that not only are they prepared to just kind of take in the fight, they have the right crosshair placement and whatnot, but this is what they do. Let's say that they want to fight and they will have to peek to the left. So what they do is they move a little bit to the right and then they peek out left. For some reason, even though they might be thinking, hey, this right here is going to counteract, this is just counter strafing, over here it cancels out. So you're still starting here from zero. Basically what you do is you give yourself that extra distance necessary in order for you to peek. And then once you peek past the wall, you'll be at full speed. Of course, this might be hard to grasp and visualize, but I'll be showing this in Valorant. Okay, but this is the main concept. Essentially, let's say there's someone behind the wall, you go in and then you go out. That's basically what you should be practicing in case you always want to think about what you could be doing better when you're peeking. Okay, so of course that's this question period, but let me just show you by hopping on Valorant really quick. Hello YouTube, this is editor Nano here. I wasn't really happy with the demonstration, so I'm going to redo it again. But since this is at the end of the video, if you have no more questions, then you guys can go right ahead and kind of click off. But don't forget to like and subscribe if you did enjoy this type of content. However, if you didn't understand what I was talking about, this is for you. Here's a couple of things that I need to make sure that are set in stone. Number one, there is a difference between doing something like this and jiggling. Okay, jiggling is the act of course, checking for opponents as you're kind of going back and forth, right? And this is done in a way that's kind of done a little bit faster, making sure that you're kind of clearing for opponents. That's what jiggling will be about. However, when you're intending to fight opponents, you can actually incorporate what I've taught you with pre-firing. So for example, if I wanted to fight an opponent right there, I can pre-aim and then I can move back and then forward all in one motion. Basically goes in and out, in, out, in, out. Now this only applies if you are intending to fight an opponent. So what you could do is you can actually add both the jiggling and this type of peeking together. You can also use it as well when you're trying to slice the pie, but you can do it in a way where you're slicing the pie a little slower. One of the things that I see players that are in lower elos, like around plat and below, what they tend to struggle with is the timing and the speed. So for example, like I said, we're talking about slicing the pie here. They'll be doing something like this where they'll be going really fast, right? And they'll be trying to clear things, right? Makes sense. They're jiggling, whatever. But there's a couple of things that they might do wrong. Number one, they might be moving a little too much. Or number two, they might be using their mouse to clear corners. And notice how we talked about how you need to be both moving either left or right and in a straight line. No diagonals. So if you're moving like this, you're kind of making a circle around the area that you're trying to fight. It is not optimal. So if you're trying to do something like slicing the pie, you're going to be a lot slower. Pay attention to the timings. I go in and I go out. In, out, in, out. Again, arbitrary as to where I'm aiming. Don't think too much about that. I want you to pay attention to the movement. I'm going in, out, in, out, in, out, right? And basically, you're going to be taking a slower, more cautious approach. You can incorporate pre-firing if you think that there's someone around the common angles, like this corner right here. In, out. You don't have to necessarily pre-fire, but this is an option if you think that they're around these areas. This is really popular with dealing with targets that have shown in these areas before, like Abyss by the little library if you push mid, right? So using this, you should be able to incorporate this to kind of add a little bit more flair to your fights. But again, if you see the demo and I'm moving like this, it just kind of shows that I'm I don't know, a little lazy in land. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware. In, out. That's it. That's the idea. It's a little bit different from jiggling. Jiggling will have you doing more of an information peak, whereas when you're trying to fight an opponent, you can actually use it to do kind of like a short swing on the angle, or you can even incorporate it to, like I mentioned, how you want to be at the fastest speed. You go in, out, in, out, right? So keep that in mind. If this video helped you, make sure to like and subscribe, add a comment if it helped you, right? Anything, just the cool little stuff. I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.